I ask that the colloquy between the distinguished senator from Tennessee and myself be as in morning business.
Without objection.
Well, thank you. Madam President, I rise today along with my colleague from Tennessee to discuss two pieces of legislation we've introduced to restore liberty and protect jobs. The first bill, S-40, the American Liberty Restoration Act, would repeal Obamacare's unconstitutional individual mandate. The second bill, S-399, the American Job Protection Act, would repeal Obamacare's job-killing employer mandate. Now, these two provisions were included in the President's health law for the purpose of raising revenues in an attempt to pay for all of the new spending under Obamacare and to garner support from the private insurance industry. I would ask Senator Alexander, if he will, has the so-called Affordable Care Act lived up to the promises President Obama made during the health care reform debate to maintain personal freedom, reduce health care costs, and decrease unemployment?
Well, Madam President, I thank the senator from Utah for his leadership on these two pieces of legislation, and the answer is no. It hasn't lived up to the promises. And let me take an example. The president often said in the debates leading up to the Health Care Act that he would promise that if you wanted to keep the insurance you had, you would be able to do that. I'm afraid it's not working out that way, and here is why. What happens is that businesses around the country are finding out that when the health care law goes into effect fully, that they'll either have to supply a certain type of health care insurance, which in many cases, maybe as much as half the cases, is a better policy and more expensive policy than they're now offering their employees, or they'll have to pay a $2,000 tax or fine to the Internal Revenue Service. That means the employee, if the business decides to do that, will go into the exchange and lose the employer insurance that the employee has. And based on my experience in talking to many businesses, there's going to be a massive rush by small businesses in particular, and by many large businesses, to stop offering employer-sponsored health insurance to their employees and instead pay the $2,000 penalty or tax. And that means that all of those employees, most of them lower income employees or middle income employees, will lose this insurance they had and be in the exchanges looking for a new insurance policy.
Madam President, I agree with my colleague and thank him for his comments. I would also argue that the individual mandate is unconstitutional. And when the law was being debated here in Congress and later, when it was being litigated in the courts, proponents repeatedly argued that the individual mandate was constitutional under the Commerce Clause. Well, that simply isn't the case. While the Supreme Court ultimately upheld the law on other grounds, the majority of justices agreed that the individual mandate was not a proper exercise of Congress's power to regulate interstate commerce. I have to say that I agree with that conclusion. Indeed, I'd say that it's simply common sense that the power to regulate interstate commerce does not include the power to compel individuals to engage in commerce, which is precisely what the individual mandate does. Despite the court's overall decision, the American people see the individual mandate for what it is, an affront to individual liberty. Indeed, the vast majority of the American people know that it violates our constitutional principles and that it cedes too much power to the federal government. That is why, in poll after poll, the majority of Americans support repealing the mandate. I would also ask the distinguished senator from Tennessee, Senator Alexander, to share his views about the individual mandate if he has any additional views.
No, I agree, Madam President, with the senator from Utah. I think he's stated clearly what the constitutionality is, and he has been the most forceful advocate of that. As I think about the legislation that we're talking about, I'm thinking also about the employer mandate and the requirement that, as I mentioned earlier, employers pay $2,000 if they don't offer insurance, or $3,000 penalty if they offer the wrong kind of insurance. I would say to the senator from Utah that we're making it more difficult to lower the unemployment rate in this country, which has stayed too high with 12 million people unemployed, when we keep loading up employers with costs that make it more expensive to hire an employee. I mean, if you make it more expensive to hire an employee, you don't give the employer an incentive to hire more people. You discourage the employer from hiring more people. And I wonder if I might ask the senator, in thinking about the employer mandate, if he agrees that employers across the country are considering reducing their number of unemployed, having more part-time unemployed, as a way of dealing with this new cost of the employer mandate, which is a part of the health care law.
Well, I'd answer the distinguished senator from Tennessee. That's certainly the case. So, there are various reports and analyses of this that indicate that a significant number of employers would rather just pay the penalty and not come up with the meeting the particular requirements that the Affordable Care Act seems to require. And on top of the unconstitutional individual mandate, this job-killing employer mandate is a real problem. Under the President's health law, employers with more than 50 full-time employees are required to offer coverage, as the distinguished senator said, that meets a minimum value or pay a penalty of $2,000 per employee. The distinguished senator from Tennessee, I think, explained this well. If the employer does offer coverage, that coverage does not meet the minimum value, then employers must pay $3,000 per employee. I've never heard of such a ridiculous approach towards business. And not surprisingly, the penalty under this provision costs less than offering coverage. According to the Kaiser Family Foundation annual survey of employer-sponsored health insurance, average annual premiums are $5,615 for single coverage and $15,745 for family coverage. Once again, the penalty for an employer who does not offer health insurance is only $2,000 per employee. That being the case, the law does not incentivize employers to offer the employees health insurance. Instead, it does exactly the opposite. Rather than footing the full cost of providing health coverage, many employers, I think, are going to take the less expensive route and simply pay the penalty, as the distinguished senator from Tennessee has so well mentioned. Even worse, many employers that currently do offer their employees health benefits under current law will likely drop the benefits and instead choose to pay the penalty. Studies are already showing that this is the case, or this will be the case. An employer survey done by McKinsey & Company found that 30% of, quote, 30% of respondents who said their companies offered employer-sponsored health insurance said they would definitely or probably drop coverage in the years following 2014, unquote. So, despite the President's claim to the contrary, Obamacare does not preserve the employer-sponsored health insurance market. It dismantles it. As a result, the President's promise that those who like their health insurance and would be able to keep it falls by the wayside. Now, I believe Senator Alexander is also concerned about the fact that the President's law defines small employers as those with less than 50 employees. In addition, I thought this law was supposed to create jobs. The President claimed that it would. So again, I just turn to my colleague from Tennessee. Does he think that has been the case? Do you think the President's been right about that?
No, I would say to my friend from Utah, I'm afraid the President was mistaken about that. And we've talked about some specifics, but let me give some very specific examples of why I believe that's true. Some time ago, I met with a large group of chief executive officers of restaurant companies in America. Now, restaurant companies are the largest employers in America of low-income, young, usually minority people. These are Americans who are often getting their first job, or they're Americans of any age who are trying to work their way up the economic ladder, starting with a lower paying job, a job that doesn't require as many skills, and hoping that instead of having a minimum wage, they'll end up someday with a maximum wage. But in order to get that maximum wage, they have to get on the ladder. They have to start somewhere. Well, here's what I was told. The chief executive officer of Ruby Tuesdays Incorporated, which has about 800 restaurants, said to me at that time, and he didn't mind being quoted, that the cost to his company of implementing the new health care law would equal his entire profit for the company last year, and that he wouldn't build any more new restaurants in the United States as a result of that. He would look to expand outside. Another, even larger restaurant company said because of their analysis of the law, that instead of operating their stores with 90 employees, they would try to operate their stores with 70 employees. So that means fewer employees. It means fewer employees receiving employer health care. And then almost every other restaurant said they were looking for ways to have more part-time employees so that they didn't have to incur the expense of the new health care law. So at least with that industry and those low-income, usually minority, often young employees, the jobs are going away because of the health care law. And with those jobs goes whatever employer health care insurance is being offered by those companies.
Same complaints by the restaurant industry, but a lot of small businesses are looking to not hire more than 50 people, and also are looking to cut their employees' work hours down below 30 hours a week in order to avoid these massive costs that would occur to them. Now, the employer mandate is a drag on our economy, forcing too many of our nation's job creators to stop hiring and growing their businesses in order to comply with the onerous provision in the President's health law. Instead of letting the federal government dictate how employers should allocate resources, we should repeal this job-killing mandate and let businesses freely manage their personal needs.
I certainly agree with the senator from Utah, and that's the purpose of our legislation. We could offer more examples. The Wall Street Journal article in February 22nd of this year said, quote, "Many franchisees of Burger King, McDonald's, Red Lobster, KFC, Dunkin' Donuts, Taco Bell, the kind of companies I was just talking about, have started to cut back on full-time employment, though many are terrified to talk on the record." The article also referenced a 2011 Hudson Institute study that estimated the employer mandate will cost the franchise industry $6.4 billion and put 3.2 million jobs at risk.
Well, I couldn't agree more with the distinguished senator from Tennessee, and I would ask unanimous consent that an article under Politico's banner, under ACA, employer mandate could mean fewer jobs. I'd ask unanimous consent that that be placed in the record at this point.
Without objection.
I want to again thank my colleague from Tennessee for working with me on these two critical issues that impact every American. And I'll conclude with a quote from a Utah employer. This is a small business owner who is concerned about what the company will do come January 1st if these mandates remain in place. This employer wrote to me saying that under Obamacare, quote, "We will have to choose who will work 30 or less hours a week, which in turn is bad for our business because we have to train more people to do one job. It is bad for our customers because they will have to interact with different employees who may not know the customer's needs as well. And it is most devastating for the employee because the employee's hours will be cut. If we want to turn this economy around, government decrees like the employer mandate must be repealed. Our job creators cannot grow and innovate with these heavy-handed regulations coming from Washington bureaucrats who have no clue how to run a business. And we must work together on this important issue for the sake of the individuals working 3 jobs at a time to make ends meet, for employers trying to keep workers on the payroll and contributing to the economy, and for our nation as a whole to put our economy on the right track and to keep us globally competitive." At least that's my viewpoint, and certainly the viewpoint of my small business colleague there in Utah.
I thank the senator from Utah for this opportunity to have the colloquy with him, and I would like to ask consent to place in the record, following my remarks, letters from the National Restaurant Association, the Chamber of Commerce of the United States, and the National Retail Federation, each of which strongly supports our legislation and makes the points that we have made about the employer mandate.
Without objection.
Again, I thank my colleague from Tennessee, and once again, I want to thank him. I'm hoping that others will hear our call for support and join us in these two crucial efforts to protect individual freedom and maintain our system of free enterprise that has built this country and made it the greatest country in the world. So I want to thank my colleague for his comments here today.
Thank you.